Behind the plaster were bones. In the cabinets, something squealed like a pig. And in the witch house, when the dead start to stir, they don't stop until you are inside the walls with them.
There's a chill in the air. Must be fall. Join me for a tale of Halloween. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Join me for a tale of Halloween. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's the second day of October, and spooky season is rockin' and rollin'. So what better way to get into the spirit of the season than move in to the witch house? But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you so much for spending a little bit of your October with me. We here at Weekly Spooky celebrate Halloween all year long, but when the most wonderful time of year comes around, well, we go all out, and we're happy to have you. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, and while you're at it, why not leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? It truly helps the show by showing other spookies they're in the right place. And if you want to support us in a very direct way, you can head to weeklyspooky.com/join, and for as little as $1 a month, get 2 bonus shows every single month, as well as 5 years of creepypasta readings and exclusive audiobooks at weeklyspooky.com/join. Head over there and join over 90 other spookies in making sure we can keep bringing you this show for another 6 years and beyond. And make sure to come back tomorrow when Joe Solmo brings us a terrifying tale of trick-or-treating and the murderous Sickle Jack. But as for tonight, what if the place you called home had already been claimed? The funeral parlor turned apartment building where every wall hides carcasses, curses, and the restless dead. Freddy thought he was just renovating a house until the whispers, the shadows, and the thing in the cabinets reminded him some doors should never be open. We go into the witch house after this. In the Witch House Walls by David O'Hanlon. For months, Freddy had felt like he was out of his mind. Now his mind was out of him and dripping down the drywall of the apartment. The top of his head was mist in the air and chunks on the faux wood laminate. One of his molars had landed in the plastic pumpkin full of fun-sized candy bars. Pieces of his scalp clung to the ceiling, turning the attached hair into black tinsel. The shotgun at his feet had done everything he expected it to, except one. That fucking figures, Freddy's spirit said. 9 months before giving his living room a fresh coat of cranial Krylon, Freddy had purchased the old Steinbeck funeral home with the intent of converting it into several apartments. 2 family units on the first floor, 4 single-bed efficiency units on the second, and a studio on the third. It had been a painstaking project. The building had served as Kuto Basin's only mortuary for almost 30 years. After a terrible spat of deaths in 1945, Stuart Steinbeck's mind broke and forced him to retire from his macabre occupation. The funeral parlor became his home. The horrible things Stuart had seen during that year haunted every waking moment, and he remained a recluse until his death in the winter of '58. Despite the home's dark origins, none of the previous owners had ever experienced anything out of the ordinary while living there. Freddy made sure he got that part in writing. He wasn't about to have tenants breaking leases over poltergeists, after all. The property had been in surprisingly good condition by the time Freddy purchased it. None of the previous owners had bothered renovating, outside of a few minor comforts and a large, in-ground pool. If they had, maybe they could have saved him a small fortune, and eventually, his fucking life. He'd planned on having the unit available by summer to use the pool as a selling point, but he realized that wasn't going to happen as he tore down the first wall. Desiccated animal carcasses hung behind the century-old plaster, wrapped in rotting cloth like mummies of the 100-acre wood. Alongside them were clusters of dried horehound and sage. Every room the contractors tore into, they found more of the same. Squirrels, raccoons, cats, and even a pair of piglets had been extracted from within the spaces. Freddy was losing money on his investment with each new discovery, but he was also losing his mind with each one they removed. And it wasn't just him either. Fewer workers returned to the job site with each passing week. At first, they complained of noxious smells, missing tools, and whispered voices in empty rooms. Then, they started getting sick. His foreman had vomited blood and maggots across the new kitchen a day after finishing the first downstairs apartment. By July, Freddy and his girlfriend, Odalys, had moved into the house to finish the work themselves. They worked day and night, and by the middle of September, they had gotten 3 second-floor units ready, plus the one downstairs opposite their own. They lowered the rent, they waived the application fees, yet no one was applying. The construction workers had told everyone about what they had found inside his walls. The locals had begun whispering, and over the months, they'd given it a name. No one wanted to live in the witch house. Or maybe they do, Odalys said from across the kitchen island. Both of them were covered in drywall dust from the last of the high-efficiency units. The next day, Odalys would start painting it while he began work in the attic. The studio was the last thing to do before Freddy could finally say he'd conquered the nightmare that had once been his dream. He didn't even see a point anymore, though. Kuto Basin was full of ghost stories, and nobody was going to move into an apartment that might turn them into one. The stacks of applications we don't have says otherwise. Freddy picked the sesame seed from the Big Mac bun. We're going to have to torch the place for insurance, while we can still fucking afford to pay for it. Baby, it's almost Halloween, she'd said conspiratorially. People want things to make sense. They want to get what they're promised. Lean into it. Sure, Freddy forced himself to say. He didn't realize what day it was. Lean into it. We can decorate all the apartments, Odalys continued. We throw a Halloween party as an open house. We will scare the shit out of them, and they'll love us for it." There's no way that'll work. Freddy pushed the value meal into the trash with everything else he hadn't eaten that week. "Tomorrow I'll get matches." "Freddy, we can do this." Odalys took his hand. Despite the grit of drywall and plaster, they were still soft. Her $100 nail job was wrecked, but she was smiling. Those 2 goddamn cute dimples told him he was wrong about everything. Freddy hadn't slept good in weeks. He'd lost almost 20 pounds in the last month, and every single part of him ached. He was racking up his credit cards, so Odalys wouldn't see how fast they were running out of money. But those dimples and that smile, with her slightly bucked teeth, gave him enough hope to work one more day. She'd always done that, given him the one more day that turned into one more week, one more month. Everything he'd accomplished in the last 5 years had been because of her smile. Remodeling the witch house was no different. He would have given up in the summer, but Odalys had smiled and promised him they could make it work. That's just who she was, his sweet, smiling guide, straight into hell.
You're not safe yet. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
The next day, Freddy began work in the attic. The floorboards thrummed beneath his sneakers from whatever Odalys was blasting on the Bluetooth speaker. He thought about going to get the other one from their bedroom, but 2 flights of stairs could fuck right off. It was going to be a hard enough day. The attic had been cleared of junk, and the basic framework of the bathroom and kitchenette had been finished by the contractors before they flaked out. Freddy would need to hire a real plumber and electrician before he could make the loft available to renters, but he could finish the demo and get the insulations and drywall installed. He tapped the crowbar against the rear wall, listening to the hollow echo from the space beyond. Freddy wasn't sure what Stuart Steinbeck had used the attic for in his lifetime, but it certainly hadn't been storage. There were stories, of course. The basin was full of stories. Freddy used the bar to scratch away a peeling flap of half-century-old wallpaper of carousel ponies. Someone had lived in the space once upon a time. "Someone's going to live here again," Freddy said, cocking the crowbar over his shoulder. "Someone with better fucking taste." His first swing did little more than stir up a cloud of dust and dislodge some more wallpaper fragments. The second went straight through the plaster, as did the third. He shoved the hook end inside the hole and jerked back with everything his emaciated body had in it. A fissure split down the wall, racing along its length in a widening spider's web of cracks. Freddy started to scream as the dust cleared. He gagged but didn't have anything in his stomach to actually throw up. Another of Steinbeck's stuffed animals hung there, twisting on its noose. The empty eye socket stared at him as it turned. Dried sage protruded from between the shriveled lips and dingy, yellow teeth. "You sick motherfucker," Freddy wheezed, covering his mouth. He tossed the crowbar at the wall. The entire structure pulsed at the blow. The plaster began to fall in pieces, clacking and knocking onto the wooden floor like hailstones ahead of a tornado. Freddy backed away, slowly, never taking his eyes off the desiccated lamb. The plaster came down in an avalanche, spilling out across the floor to meet him. He coughed and fanned at the air. As the dust settled, he saw the animal was not alone. Freddy sank to his knees, trying to catch his breath. Since construction began, he was sure he had seen every animal in Ohio in its mummified form. Every animal, except for one. Hidden behind the wall were 6 lambs, 3 on either side of the withered, leathery thing that occupied the middle. Unlike the farm animals that hung from the neck, this one had its limbs bound tightly. Freddy didn't know how, but he knew that meant the child had been alive when the wall went up. "Baby, come back to bed," Odalys grumbled sleepily. "I am in bed," Freddy said bleakly. He stared at the ceiling, wondering what time it was. He hadn't told her what he found in the attic, aside from saying it was more of Steinbeck's voodoo shit. Once he'd ripped down the rest of the walls to make sure there were no more human remains, he'd stuffed the carcasses in thick, black trash bags and hefted them into the open-topped dumpster out back. "That was so weird," Odalys yawned, rolled over, and draped her arm across him. "I thought you were in the closet." Freddy kissed the top of her head. The leave-in conditioner was oily on his lips, and the floral scent made him want to sneeze. His eyes fell on the closet. Maybe it was one of his coats, hanging just right, but it did look like someone was there. Freddy returned to his vigil, staring straight through the textured ceiling and into that damned attic. He'd given the dead kid its own trash bag. That was the best he could do as far as a proper burial goes. Reporting it was out of the question. The kid had been there since the 50s. They probably would have died of old age already, so it was unlikely anyone was still around that would care that he'd tossed the body into the dumpster with all the other dead things. Freddy sighed as Odalys started to snore. He assumed it was all the paint messing up her sinuses, because she even snored cute on a normal day. This wasn't cute. It was more like snorting. Freddy worked to emancipate himself from Odalys's slender body without waking her. He eased off the bed and glanced back at the closet. "Jesus, that is creepy," he admitted, reconsidering his choice of opaque frontages on the twin doors. Watching Odalys sleep, it became clear that she wasn't the source of the sound. Freddy followed the noise, tracking it by volume until he'd isolated it to the kitchen. Freddy flipped the light switch. His eyes stung and blurred from the assault. The shadows stretching across the walls looked disturbingly human as the organs adjusted to the brightness. He rubbed at them with his palms. Everything appeared once he'd finished. The noise had also ceased. As Freddy turned to leave, a guttural snort once more. He spun on a bare heel, looking for the source. The cabinet under the sink tapped once. Then, again. He watched it move on the hinges, as if something were trying to open it from the inside, but wasn't quite strong enough. It tapped and tapped, the efforts growing more frantic. The animalistic grunting grew frustrated.
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Rats? It can't be rats, Freddy whispered. He went to the sink and grabbed a glass from the drying rack to catch the intruder. He knelt in front of the cabinet, chewing his bottom lip nervously as the animal's attempts escalated. He debated not looking. There was no point seeing the vermin if he wasn't seeing the income to deal with them. Let the little bastards be until we get some tenants, he told himself. That just wouldn't do, however. They were just another problem on the ever-growing list of shit that was bleeding him dry. At least he could kill this problem. That might make him feel a little better. Dead rats aren't an issue, like that kid. Dead is gone and gone isn't a problem. Freddy hesitated, thinking once more about the child's corpse he dropped in the dumpster. What the hell is wrong with me? This place is eating my fucking brain, that's what. I should have called the cops. I should have said to hell with money. I should have done anything other than that. He gripped the cabinet door and turned the glass over to catch the pest. You didn't do something else, though. Did you, Freddy? The animal had stopped trying to escape. A sudden, pig-like squeal tore through the kitchen. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered. The plaintive, primal cries grew louder and louder still, until he thought his ears would bleed. The cabinet resumed its banging. Others joined in on the symphony. Freddy crawled backwards across the floor until he ran into the island. He slapped his hands over his ears. The cabinet flew open, and the noises stopped. Freddy pulled himself up, never looking away from the darkened space beneath the sink. Eyes shined in the blackness. Freddy crawled towards them. His curiosity overrode the urge to flee. The thing beneath the sink snorted again, then oinked softly. It moved forward, coming to the edge of the light, but not into it. "What's going on?" Odalys asked groggily. She ran a hand through bed-battered hair. "It's late, baby. We have a lot of decorating to do tomorrow." Freddy, still on all fours, glanced back at her. "I think we have a rat or something." "That's not a 3 a.m. problem," she said, moving to him. "Yeah, you're right." Freddy looked back at the cabinet, only to find it was closed. He sat up on his knees, pulled himself up by the sink. "There's nothing we can do about it this early." "You know what is a 3 a.m. problem?" Odalys let her hand slither up his thigh, and then walked her fingers to the open fly of his boxers until they crawled inside to grasp him. "I'm not really... It's not a good time," he stammered. "I can change your mind." Odalys sank to the floor. Freddy heard the broken glass crunch as her knees settled onto the shards. He started to speak, but was cut off by the sudden, warm wetness of her mouth engulfing him. Despite the nightmare fuel of the previous few moments, he swelled inside her mouth. He had barely rose to the occasion when he convulsed with the first orgasm he'd had in months. Odalys didn't let his climax stop her as she moved a hand to the base of his shaft and worked it in unison. She moaned, grasping his ass with her free hand, until he felt skin breaking beneath the thin fabric. to his surprise, he stayed hard. His eyes rolled back in his head as she brought him to another, body-shaking ejaculation. Freddy's ecstatic squeal matched the thing beneath the sink as Odalys finally let him slip from her mouth. His thoughts returned to that terrifying thing he hadn't seen. "Now will you come back to bed?" Odalys didn't wait for his answer as she walked away. Freddy stared at the shape of her ass, barely concealed beneath one of his t-shirts. Then he noticed the blood. Rivulets of it running down her calves from the cuts on her knees. Spots led back to him and the puddle around the broken glass. "Babe!" he called, but she had already left. He tucked his deflating dick into his underwear and rushed to the bedroom, needing to check on her. The drops got fatter, wetter, as he followed her path. He pushed the door open fully to their room and almost screamed. Odalys was sound asleep, just as he'd left her. A pig squealed somewhere in the house.
More scares to come. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Freddy said nothing about the previous night as they decorated. Stolen glances at Odalys while she showered showed no signs of the cuts she'd gotten in the kitchen. He was convinced he'd dreamt the whole thing. His inability to get a hard-on when she tried to instigate a morning quickie had all but confirmed that for him. He was financially and morally broke, and now his cock didn't work either. They worked all day to get the house ready. Purple and orange string lights, fake spiderwebs, and foam jack-o'-lanterns were the first things up. Odalys strategically placed the skeletons in corners and hung rubber bats from the ceilings in all of the apartments. Freddy couldn't help much there. Every time he tried to move the plastic corpses, he remembered the mummified child and how its limbs had snapped dryly as he forced them into the trash bag. He offered to take care of the outside decor instead. Getting out of the house would do him some good. Once the basics were out of the way, he moved on to carving a few real pumpkins. Odalys's plan seemed to be working. Cars were slowing down to read the yard sign, promising a big party. Pedestrians were actually taking the risk of walking on to the witch house lawn. People seemed excited. Some even waved at him and asked if they should wear a costume. Freddy felt invigorated. Someone might actually rent one of his damn apartments. Or is it damned apartments? He wondered, thinking again about all the strange occurrences since they'd bought it. Thinking again about the dead things in the walls, the sickness, the accidents, the sulfurous smells, the sounds. Thinking about the doppelganger in the kitchen. Especially about her. "Oh, now you fucking work again." Freddy stared at the bulge in his jeans and decided it was time for a break. Odalys must have had the same idea. He'd just started up the stairs to the second floor when she ambushed him on the landing. She took the carving knife from his hand. Freddy's eyes froze on the sticky blade, positive that he had left it stuck in the pumpkin on the porch. He gasped as Odalys used it to cut open his shirt. The knife fell from her hand, stabbing into the floor beside their feet. Freddy grabbed her shoulders and turned her around, pushing her against the guardrail. He jerked her leggings down to her thighs, drawing excited giggles from her. He tore at his zipper, finally wrestling himself free, and thrust inside her. He grunted as she slammed herself back to match his efforts. His fingers squeezed deeply into her hips. "What the fuck, Freddy?" Odalys shouted from downstairs. Freddy looked down at her with equal confusion. His hand still pumped wildly on his shaft until he realized what he was doing. He choked on the words he was trying to say. Odalys stood there, holding the pizza she'd brought home for dinner. Freddy looked from her to the last bit of light coming from the front door. It had been midday when he came inside. "Are you serious right now?" she asked. "You weren't in the mood this morning, but I go get food and you're... What are you doing? Christening the fucking house?" She threw down the pizza and stormed into their apartment. Freddy slumped to the floor, cradling his head in his hands. Odalys slammed the door. Nothing made sense anymore. He heard the pig rutting around in the attic. A breeze coming from one of the apartments carried the same musty stench as all the dead things he'd pulled from the walls. He pried the knife from the floor and went to look for the open window that was letting the odor in from the dumpster. Then he'd go kill that fucking pig, rat, or whatever it was. He wandered through Unit 203, carefully eyeing Odalys's decorations. The bats seemed to flap their wings as the outside air blew in. She'd done such a great job. He didn't know what the hell was wrong with him, but he wasn't going to let it ruin things with her. They were going to have their party, and after that, finances be damned, he was going to find a therapist. It was a nervous breakdown. The stress had finally put too much weight on him. Simple as that. Who the fuck wouldn't break in the witch house? Freddy closed the window, and a cabinet banged open in the kitchen. Freddy looked into the eyes that hid within. "You're not real," he whispered. "You're not there at all." The animal moved deliberately. Strands of brown hair dangled over the precipice of the cabinet. The child leaned its head back, glaring at Freddy with its bruised, pale face, and smiled with broken and missing teeth. She unfolded herself from the space, descending like a spider down the counter and onto the floor. Freddy's hand tightened around the knife. Someone knocked on the door, and he turned to see Odalys standing in the entryway, naked and bleeding from open cuts on her knees. She opened her mouth to speak. Her voice was no longer the sweet, soft sound of reassurance. It was a pig's squeal. "Stay back, goddammit!" He sliced and stabbed at the air. "You're not real! You're not fucking real!" The child sprang onto his back. Her cold, withered arms wrapped around his neck. Her legs seized him around the waist. Teeth scraped open his scalp, and Odalys stalked towards him. Freddy tossed wildly, trying to break free of the tangle of wet sheets. They clung to him as he fell over the side of the bed. He forced himself to stand and peel away the jersey knit skin. The blood staining his body looked black in the darkness. The bathroom door squeaked open, spilling its light onto the bed. The chef's knife laid on the soggy pillow. Odalys wasn't there. Or maybe she was. Freddy reached for the leaking trash bag on her side of the bed, but couldn't bring himself to look. He already knew what was inside. It wasn't the first body he'd shoved in one. After all, Freddy went to the closet. It still looked like someone was in there. He hoped there was. He prayed for some maniac to jump out and kill him too, to cut him into pieces and stuff him in a trash bag. Right next to Odalys. At least if that happened, it would mean the other thing hadn't. No one waited behind the door, however. He retrieved the shotgun from the top shelf. Things got rough in the old neighborhood. He swore he'd get rid of it once they got the apartments up and running. They wouldn't need it anymore, he told Odalys. He told her he'd take care of her, and that they'd never live in a place like that ever again. He hadn't lied. Indeed, they wouldn't be going back to the old neighborhood ever again. Freddy's spirit lingered in the living room. Not even suicide had gone as planned. The cabinets banged and tapped and opened in unison. He floated into the kitchen, leaving his dead husk behind. Eyes watched him for their hiding places. A rotting, bloodied Odalys looked at him from across the island. Maggots wriggled from between her lips. A tiny hand grasped his, and he glanced down at the child. Leprous piglets, with their flesh falling off their bones, sat at her feet. Something growled on one of the floors above him. The echo shook the foundations of the former funeral home. Freddy had always believed death was the end. In the witch house, it was only the second act. And that, my spookies, is the witch house, where the walls whisper, the dead still breathe, and the nightmare never truly ends. But don't get too comfortable, because this is only night 2 of our 31 shows in 31 days, all October long, on Weekly Spooky. Every single day, a new scare is waiting for you. Tomorrow, we ride out into the crisp autumn streets with a group of boys looking for mischief on Halloween night. But instead of tricks, they'll stumble into the legend of Sickle Jack, the harvester of souls, a pumpkin-headed terror with a blade as sharp as the midnight wind, and a harvest no one escapes. So keep your jack-o'-lanterns lit and your bicycles close by, because tomorrow night, Sickle Jack comes calling. And I want to say an extra thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who head to weeklyspooky.com/join and sign up at the $15 or higher tier to hear their name at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Micah Skewy, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and if you want to hear your name in my silky, spooky voice, head to weeklyspooky.com/join and sign up to help the show keep going and going, well past another 6 years and beyond. But now it's time for me to get back to work, because I'll be seeing you guys right here tomorrow to share the terror tale of Sickle Jack. So for myself, for my executive producers Rob Fields and Bobbletopia.com, my producer Dan Wilder, and my composer Ray Mattis, be careful what you find in the walls of your home. Trust me on that one. I'll talk at you later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me. Ha 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 ha!